Good evening, Mandal. We'll be starting in a minute. We request all the presenters who are waiting for their presentation will be taking up after international speakers. So kindly share your details in the chat box. So after the international sessions are over, then we will invite you. Good evening, one and all. We welcome you all to the International Conference on Social Work, Social Sciences, Medical, Health, Allied Sciences, Technologies, Intergenerational Solidarity, Health, Well-being, Environment and Sustainable Development 2025. Commemorating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, nation celebrating 77 years of independence and United Nations Sustainable Development Goals 2015 to 2030, Viksit Bharat at 2047, and also World Social Work Day, World Social Work Week, and World Social Work Month 2025 in collaboration with Sri Holistic Health Foundation India and Sri Research Institute Center for Art, Sciences, and Wellbeing. So before we start our sessions, let's take the blessings of Almighty.
कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शत्रुबुद्धिविनाशाय दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः
With the blessings of Almighty, we shall continue with today's sessions. Today, we have with us Professor Matt from EQ for Peace, Worldwide Inc. And we also have Ray Mathis from USA. And we welcome you all on the 7th day of International Conference. We request you to unmute yourself, start your video, and take over for the session. Yeah, welcome, Matt.
Hello.
Welcome, Ray Mathis.
Good morning.
Good morning for you.
Thanks for having us again.
Good morning.
Yep. Good information. Ray's got another presentation, but this is a different subject today. And so, as usual, full of good information. I'll be taking lots of notes as usual. But I'm going to need to leave in a half an hour, so I won't be able to stay till the end. Apologize for that. There's conflict. But you guys carry on, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay? So, Ray, take it away, bud. Thank you.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, it's okay, Mac. Please continue.
Okay, we should be good.
Yep.
Not sure why it's not on the first. There we go. Okay, so the title of today's presentation is Teaching and Encouraging People to Have what Dr. Albert Ellis used to call unconditional self-acceptance, or USA. And the purpose of doing that is to combat shame. My name is Ray Mathis. I taught health education to high school freshmen for 33 years. And since 2007, when I retired from the classroom, I've been a mental health educator representing the Chicago Institute for Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy, or REBT. One of the things I learned very early in my career is that the real problem was that too many of my students generated what I call a dysfunctional amount of emotion, which by that I mean more than is necessary, more than is helpful, more than they wanted to have, more than they knew what to do with, and a type and amount that worked against them instead of for them, as emotion is intended to. So I was always looking for a way to help my students better manage their emotions. And then one day I was complaining to a counselor. I was having a bad day myself emotionally. I was complaining to a friend who was a school counselor, and he finally said, "Look, Ray, it's your choice how you want to feel." And he told me about Dr. Albert Ellis's ABC theory of emotions, where A is an activating event, B is your beliefs about the event, other is yourself in life, and C is the consequences, or what you feel and do as a consequence of what you believe about the activating event. And he told me that they had classes offered for teachers in rational emotive behavioral therapy and rational emotive behavioral education in the Chicago area where I lived. And I ended up taking 30 postgraduate hours in REBT and REBE. And I developed for my students what I call a mental and emotional toolkit for life. And the whole idea behind a toolkit is no matter what we try to fix or build, there's always a limited or finite number of tools that can be brought to bear. The trick is learning what tool is called for and getting good at using it. Now, if I truly believe from my experience that if we give people the right tools and show them how to use them, they can and will do much to help themselves. That's been my experience throughout my career. Now, tool number 2 is actually unconditional self-acceptance, which could easily be number 1. Now, the reason tool is so important is the feeling of shame. And one of the things the work I did in REBT taught me is just how important a role shame plays in everything. And the reason is, this is the way it comes about. Shame arises when someone believes they're not living up to expectations, either others or their own. Now, one of my favorite quotes is from William Shakespeare. It's, "Expectation is the root of all heartache." There's a lot of truth to that. Now, we all have plenty of expectations placed on us by others, starting very early in our life, and place many more on ourselves. What that means is plenty of opportunities to feel shame. Now, there's a lot more shame out there, I think, than most parents, teachers, counselors, and social workers realize. Dr. Ellis, because everybody's expectations seem to be increasing all the time, especially for teachers. Being retired from teaching profession, I kind of just amazed at all the expectations there are of new teachers nowadays, and I'm just not sure I would want that. Anyways, Dr. Ellis said that shame can be both a primary and secondary disturbance. And by primary, he meant shame is often the primary feeling people seek relief from through drinking, using drugs, shutting down, dropping out, even suicide. When someone attempts suicide, people typically think it's because they're depressed, and that's very often true, but it's often also because they believe they haven't lived up to expectations in some way and never will. Now, many kids that I've worked with have what I call siblings or parents who are what I call hard acts to follow, which means they're highly educated, successful, maybe a professional of some sort, like a doctor, lawyer, banker, whatever, or they might have high achieving siblings. And just having highly successful parents or siblings can create expectations that are unhelpful, even if the parents and siblings never say anything. Now, if a student has a hard act to follow, my point has always been with teachers or counselors, look for signs that the student is struggling with or living up to expectations and struggling with the feeling of shame. Now, shame as a secondary disturbance, what Dr. Ellis meant by that is it causes people to keep secrets, and it makes them less likely to seek or accept help that is available to them. Now, he used to sum that effect up by saying shame blocks change. And it's why we work so hard in the very beginning with someone to deal with the shame and get that out of the way. Now, it's why teaching and encouraging someone to choose to have USA is one of the first things we do in REBT. Now, the types of secrets they keep are what they think and feel, what they've done or may be doing at the time, and especially what they might be struggling with, or perhaps who they are. For example, if they were LGBTQ. Now, the fear is that if others found out or they sought help, it would reflect badly on them in some way. It would be one more way they didn't live up to expectations. Now, keeping secrets can play out tragically, for example, suicide or even school shooting. Many times when we have school shootings in the United States, which we have way too many, we learn that these kids were keeping a lot of secrets about how they thought and felt. When someone commits suicide, it's not uncommon for those around them to say, I didn't know anything was wrong. I was at a conference once and a lady was talking to me and she got a text while we were standing there. And she said, oh my God, my daughter's best friend or roommate just committed suicide. And she said, I didn't know anything was wrong. And that's because they can be so good at keeping secrets. Now, what happens when they keep secrets is the process of ruminating, which means people repeat unhelpful thoughts to themselves, like what we used to call broken records, where just over and over and over again. And when they do that to themselves, they don't get the challenge that they might get if they said it out loud. And that repetition causes ruts in their brain. And these ruts are like real ruts in dirt roads. They're easy to slip into, hard to stay out of or get out of once you get in them. And ruts make thoughts automatic. They do the same thing with feelings and behaviors as well. Now, when thoughts become automatic, simple opinions about themselves, others in life, start to feel like facts or givens or truths. And simple imaginations can become reality for them. Now, these facts, givens, and truths then can become what I call the irrational logic of all kinds of unhelpful behavior, including suicide. All right, now, by irrational logic, what I mean is they do something that makes their life worse for them and possibly others, which is irrational by definition, but it seems logical to them to do what they do because of what they've come to believe from rehearsing and practicing it. Now, for example, if you think about someone sitting there telling themselves all the time, this is really awful, it's never going to get better, I can't go on like this, I can't take it anymore, I have to make it stop. Well, what might it seem logical to do? Well, perhaps take their own life. And suppose someone had thoughts like these all the time. I can't let them get away with that, I have to get even, they have to pay for what they've done. Well, that's why we have some kids get a gun from their family's home and go into a school and shoot it up. Teachers and adults will sometimes say the problem with these kids they have no shame. I've heard that many times someone would come into the teacher's lounge and be upset about something. The problem with these kids is they have no shame. The real problem is that they struggle with too much shame, often from a lifetime of being told and believing they don't live up to expectations. I worked with, when I retired from the classroom, I volunteered to run what I call tool time groups for the most troubled and troublesome kids at my wife's school. And what I used to try to always tell the teachers they had is that what they struggle with are three things: ESP, estrangement, shame, and powerlessness. And those are the three things I always tried to work on. Now, too often teachers and other adults will actually tell a kid, you should be ashamed of yourself. I was working on a presentation one day, and my daughter happened to come by, and I said, I'm curious, did anyone ever tell you to be ashamed of yourself in school? And she started tearing up. Her eyes started to water. I said, what's the matter? She said, almost every day of my life. And that just should never happen. Okay. Now, kids will shame themselves enough. They don't need encouragement from adults in their life to do that. And telling a student who is already struggling with shame, you should be ashamed of yourself, would be like telling an alcoholic he or she should drink more. Now, shame can also lead to anxiety, because if you believe you haven't lived up to expectations in the past, it's easy to imagine you won't live up to expectations again in the future. Now, and what happens then is, for kids, for example, everyday activities in school and the challenges we present with them can become quite threatening. And I used to always work with the teachers of the students I had in my tool time groups. And one of the things I would always try to tell them is that one way to look at it is, when kids struggle with shame, you get one of three things. You get turtles who suck into their shells. You get rabbits who want to run away. And you get rattlesnakes who coil, rattle, and sometimes even strike out with venom. Okay? And too often the ones that we have trouble dealing with, most teachers have trouble dealing with, are the rattlesnakes. Okay. So too often the way teachers and parents approach a child or teen rattler is equivalent to poking a real rattlesnake with a stick. And that never ends well for either the rattler or the person doing the poking. Now, it can help to remember, and I've always encouraged people to think of this, that when real rattlers coil, rattle, and strike out with venom, they do that because they feel threatened. Okay. And the same is true with child or teen rattlers. They feel threatened by what we're asking of them. Okay. So I always try to encourage people to see their behavior, that's striking out, that coiling, rattling, striking out with venom, see that as a symptom, not a problem. Okay. And not something to feel threatened by. It's a symptom that they're struggling with anxiety and shame, and probably because they're feeling in some way they're not or haven't lived up to expectations. Okay. And when you deal with kids like that, I had a couple of rules. One was first do no harm rule, because I was also a paramedic for a long time. And that's a rule we live by. No matter what, first do no harm. If you can't make it better, at least don't make it worse. Okay. And the other rule I had is, if you do what others have always done with troubled and troublesome kids, with rattlers, if you do what others have always done, you'll get what others have always gotten. So do something different. Okay. Come at them a different way. And I used to always think of the late Steve Irwin, who, he used to work with all these venomous snakes, and he used to always tell his audience as he was handling them, sometimes they would strike at him, and there's a picture of a cobra there, and he would always tell people they're doing that because they feel threatened. So he would always try to make the snake feel less threatened so he could handle it. And the ways to make them teenage or child rattlers feel less threatened is, I believe, choose to have unconditional other acceptance and let them know that you do. And I'm going to explain what that is in a few seconds. And teach and encourage them to choose to have unconditional self-acceptance. Now, USA, or unconditional self-acceptance, means choosing to see whatever we think, feel, say, or do, have in the past or might in the future, whatever mistakes we've made, whatever we struggle with, or who or how we are, for example, being LGBTQ, to see all those things as part of being human and understandable given what our life experiences have been, which may have been much different than others, and what we have to deal with at the moment. Okay. And most of all, that's nothing to be ashamed of. Okay. Now, part of being human means we'll never be the first person in human history to think, feel, say, or do something, to make a particular mistake, to struggle with something, to be a certain way, and we'll never be the last. We'll always have a lot of company. And one of the things I used to always do with students when I started working with them, I would ask them, do you think you're the first kid to come through my classroom or come through the school to think, feel, say, or do what you do or did, to make that particular mistake, to struggle with something like you are, to have doubts about your ability, to not like the way you are? Do you think you'll be the last? And of course, the answer is no. They're not the first and they won't be the last. And when I work with teachers sometimes, I say, do you think you're the first teacher or counselor to struggle with the challenges of the job, to make mistakes with kids, to not do as well as you'd like, to have doubts about your ability or even choice of profession? And the answer, of course, is no. You're not the first. You're not going to be the last. It's part of being human. Understandable means if you put others through exactly what we've been through, they'd probably end up thinking, feeling, and doing much the same. Some might fare better. Others might fare worse. Everything tends to be like a bell curve distribution. There's always some people who do better at things, always some that do worse, and most people are probably somewhere in the middle. So most would probably end up much the same. Now, there's 3 strategies I use to encourage people to choose to have USA. And one of them is to teach the formula nature plus nurture equals personality, where nature is all those constants about human physical, psychological, and social development, and where nurture is a person's life experiences, and personality is a pattern of thoughts, feelings, and behavior. And it's like that formula A plus B equals C we learned in algebra, where A is a constant and B is a variable. If A stays the same and you change B, C changes. Likewise, if someone has certain life experiences, you get a predictable pattern of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. That's quite common. Okay. Strategy 2 is I suggest to a student or even a teacher or counselor, suppose that on the day you were born, we took, I spelled that wrong. We took 100 other newborns and from that day forward, expose them to every single life event you've experienced. Then I posed the question, what do you think they would think, feel, say, and do today? And my guess is probably pretty much the same. Now, some might fare better, others might fare worse, but most would probably be the same. Now, strategy 3 is to suggest that we all should come with movies of our lives, and people should have to watch our movies when they first meet us. And then the question becomes, would they probably, if they watched our movies, would they probably see the understandable reasons we think, feel, say, and do what we do now? And I think the answer is yes. Okay. Now, USA also means choosing to believe that we all do the best we can at the time, given what our life experiences have been and what we have to deal with at the moment. And we're all what Dr. Ellis used to call FHBs. We're all fallible human beings who at times think, feel, say, and do things that make our own lives worse, and sometimes the lives of others worse instead of better. Now, then the question becomes, if we watched others' movies, would we probably see the understandable reasons they think, feel, say, and do what they do now? And I think the answer to that is also yes. So that's where we come into, or what we call unconditional other acceptance, UOA, which means choosing to see what others think, feel, say, or do, have in the past, or might in the future the same way. That whatever they think, feel, say, or do is also part of being human and understandable given what their life experiences have been, which may have been much different than our own, and what they have to deal with at the moment. Now, we can still dislike or disagree with what they think, feel, say, or do. It just helps to temper our emotional response to what we don't like or disagree with, which is good for our own mental health. Now, looking at this things this way can prevent needless conflicts and keep existing ones from escalating. All right. When I ran tool-time groups, one of the first things I would always do is start my groups by saying, I want you to know something about me. I want you to know I choose to have something called UOA, or unconditional other acceptance. And then I would let them explain to them what that meant. Okay. And choosing to have UOA and letting others know that you do makes you an easier person to be around. It makes you a better friend, sibling, parent, teacher, spouse, coach, counselor, social worker. Okay. It makes people more likely to open up to you if they know you have unconditional other acceptance, and which could literally save a life. Now, having UOA and letting others know you do, if you do that, you are more likely to choose to have USA because you're practicing that way of thinking with them. And they are more likely to choose to have USA because you're kind of inviting them to do that and modeling for them how to do that. Now, there are other tools that can help combat shame. I want to go through a couple of those. Tool number 10 in the Mental and Emotional Toolkit for Life is understanding why change is hard and what it takes to change the way we think, feel, say, and do. And when we practice thinking, feeling, saying, or do something the same way over and over again, we create what a neuroscientist told me they call ruts in our brain. Now, ruts make thoughts, feelings, and behaviors automatic. And brain physiology is a double-edged sword. By that, I mean, ruts can be helpful or unhelpful things to have. I can do math in my head because I've memorized the math tables, addition, subtraction, division, multiplication. But I also use the F word sometimes too much, and then sometimes it pops out when I don't want it to, like in front of my grandkids. It depends on what thoughts, feelings, or behaviors they give rise to. Now, ruts are why people recreate their past, why their histories can become their destinies, and that can be helpful or unhelpful as well. It depends on what their past and histories have been. But the key point is once we create ruts, we can never get rid of them, okay? We can only make new ones and hope they compete for use with our old ruts. And we do that the same way we create new ruts, the same way we created the old ones, by practicing and rehearsing new ways of thinking. But even then, and this is the important part, even then we can and will probably slip into our old ruts from time to time. Doing that is part of being human. Now, so ruts are a reason to cut yourself some slack when you think, feel, say, or do things that are unhelpful, things you may have done many times before. So slip back into your old ways. So it's a reason to cut yourself some slack. And it's a reason to cut others some slack when they think, feel, say, and do things that are unhelpful and slip into their old ways. Now, there's an old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound to cure. There's a way people set themselves up to feel shame. And it has to do with the way how they manage their expectations. Now, this is a simple model for stress that I use. There's 3 ways you can basically look at wanting to do something ahead of time, okay? You could not care about it. And if you didn't care about what happened, whether you accomplished something or not, well, there'd be no threat in imagining that you might not. So it's easy to stay calm. But once you start to want to accomplish something, there's always a possibility you won't. And it's pretty normal for a human being to imagine that you might not. So that creates a certain amount of threat. And that would generate what we call concern. But many people will put their think thermostat at have to. I have to do this. I have to get this done today. I have to get an A on this test. And that causes the threat to be much greater if or when they imagine not accomplishing what they want. So they're going to feel a lot of anxiety. Okay. So, for example, the way someone might create anxiety is to say, I have to get an A on this test instead of I want to get an A on this test, or I can't fail this test instead of I don't want to fail this test. And anxiety can impair performance. So telling yourself you have to makes you more prone to imagine you won't. It magnifies the perceived threat out of proportion to reality. And you get this urge to flee that perceived threat. That increases. And that makes it hard to function at the level you're capable of or want to. when you have this overwhelming urge to flee. Now, and telling yourself you have to before an event sets you up for doing what we call shoulding on yourself after an event. Okay. So there's three basic ways you could approach yourself, what happened after the event. Okay. You could not care about it. If you didn't care what happened, you'd be indifferent to what did. Or you could wish you had done something or wish you hadn't. And then if things didn't turn out the way you wish they had, then you'd have regret and remorse. But what people often do is they should on themselves, which means they say, I should have or I shouldn't have, and they generate shame or guilt. So the way to generate shame and guilt, someone would should on themselves and say, I should have done better, I shouldn't have got so many wrong, instead of simply saying, I wish I had done better, I wish I hadn't got so many wrong. Now, and people can get into a vicious cycle by starting out by saying they have to do something and generating anxiety, which can impair their performance. Then they're more prone to should on themselves afterwards and generate shame or guilt. And then next time around, they're more likely to think, I have to do it even more. All right. So what we do, the way we challenge this, the way we would break this vicious cycle is if somebody said, I have to get an A in this test, if it was a student, I said, look, we call it affirming the preference. It's great that you want to get an A on this test. That's great. That's good for a student to want to do that. But why do you have to? You have to or just want to? And what I'm basically asking them is, where do you want to set your think thermostat? Because if you set it at have to, you're more likely to feel more threatened by what's about to occur and have anxiety, instead of if you set it at I want to and simply have concern. So you can set your think thermostat wherever you want to. We all have that option, but there will be predictable emotional behavioral consequences for where we do set our thermostats if things don't turn out the way we wanted them to. Now, so the only correct answers to those questions I posed was, I don't have to, I just want to, which is good. And I don't have to do anything. Now, so where we really want to set our think thermostat before an event, before we try to accomplish something, is at the top of I want to, where we really want to do so. Those are the kind of students a teacher likes to have in their class, where someone really wants to do well. But as soon as people raise their thermostat to I have to, then the threat starts to go up, the anxiety starts to come up, and the urge to flee that situation or that challenge start to increase. Now, as far as someone's shooting on themselves, if you watch tapes of Dr. Ellis from years ago, when he used to work with people and videotape it, he'll be telling people, stop shooting on yourself. He had this kind of raspy voice. And I used to always jokingly tell my students, shooting on yourself just makes you feel shitty. And there's also people sometimes wear shirts. I've seen shirts where people say, I'm not going to shoot on myself today. So that's another thing someone could do. So the whole idea is to turn your think thermostat down a notch from I should have or I shouldn't have, which would cause you to generate shame or guilt, to I wish I had or I wish I hadn't. So you simply have regret or remorse, which can be helpful energy or helpful emotions to have. Now, another thing people do to cause shame is to label and damn themselves. Now, everyone has the right to like or dislike whatever they want to, including their own behavior. What the mistake they make is to label and damn themselves, to condemn the doer instead of the deed. Now, for example, saying I'm stupid for failing that test, or I'm an idiot for letting them get away with that. Now, so they're labeling, damning themselves, and that makes them more likely to feel or experience shame and guilt. Now, label and damning is overgeneralization. And the best way I explain it is like using an apple metaphor. It's like calling an apple bad simply because it has a bruise, even though the rest of the apple is fine. It's condemning the doer instead of the deed. Now, for example, so if a student were to say, I'm stupid for doing that, I would challenge them or question them. I would say, why are you stupid just because of that? You're stupid or just did a stupid thing. A lot of very smart people do stupid things. You're stupid or just did something you didn't like. And you're stupid or what Dr. Ellis called a fallible human being like everyone else. We're all fallible human beings. Now, So I'm asking them where they want to set their think thermostat. Do you want to label and name yourself and feel shame or guilt? You can do that if you want, or would you prefer to just simply dislike your behavior and have some regret and remorse? Now, the only correct answers, or what I would hope they would come to realize, is I'm not stupid just because of that. I'm not stupid, I just did a stupid thing, which, welcome to the human race. I'm not stupid, I did something I didn't like. I'm not stupid, I'm just a fallible human being like everyone else. Now, tool number 3 is also something that can help prevent shame, and it's called developing an internal locus of control. Now, most people walking the planet have an external locus of control. They wrongly believe, oh, I spelled that wrong, what others say and do when it happens makes them feel the way they do, good or bad, including when they feel ashamed. But that's not how life works. There's a simple formula for how life really works. It's event plus thoughts equals feelings and behavior. Now, anything that others say or do or that happens is just an event in their lives. Events can be real-time, remembered, imagined, internal, or external. The important point is that it's really what we choose to think about events that causes how we feel. Thoughts cause feelings, not events. So shame comes from inside us, not from outside us. Okay. It's not what other people say or do what happens. It's what we think about it. And we all have a host of what I call cognitive choices we make all the time that really determine how we feel, including whether we feel shamed or not, or maybe simply regret or remorse. For example, how you look at what happens, your things and yourself, what meaning you attach to what does happen. What does it mean if something doesn't go as well as you'd like? What you focus on, what you compare things and yourself to, what you expect of yourself, others, in life in the first place, what you remember about the past, what you imagine for the future. You imagine that things are always going to be bad and not turn out well. How much importance you attach to what does happen. Is it a big deal or a little deal that you didn't accomplish what you wanted and aren't doing as well as you'd like? And what you spend your time thinking about. Now, fact of life, there's always more than one way to think about or look at anything or make all these other choices. Some ways we might make these choices will make us feel better, others worse. Some ways will make us feel ashamed, and others might simply cause us to feel regret or remorse. Now, one of my favorite quotes is from Dr. Viktor Frankl, who said, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last human freedoms, to choose one's own attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." Therefore, to a greater extent than most people realize, it's our choice how we want to feel, including whether we feel ashamed or not. Now, too often what happens, what someone else thinks and says about a person ends up influencing and sometimes becomes what they think, what they end up thinking and perhaps even saying about themselves. And that's why I think it's important also to teach people to have what I call mental and emotional karate, which means defending yourself mentally, emotionally against attacks of others in life events, the way some people learn to defend themselves against physical attacks in real karate classes. And one of my favorite quotes to teach people is, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent or feel ashamed." So we look at two terms from psychology. Self-image is how you look at yourself. Self-esteem is how you feel about yourself. Well, if you plug these things into our formula, what someone else thinks, feels, says about you, well, that's their choice. You don't have any control over that. They can say, think, and feel and say whatever they want to. Okay. But how you look at yourself is something that is only up to you. That's something you can control. And that determines how you feel about yourself, because thoughts cause feelings, not events. So that's something you can also control, what your self-esteem is. Now, so what I try to teach people to have is what I call a black belt in mental and emotional karate as a way to combat feeling ashamed. If someone else attacks them, rather than take that to heart and feel ashamed, you could say something like this. You can think, feel, say whatever you want to about me. That's your choice. But it's my choice how I look at and feel about myself, and you don't get to make those choices for me unless I let you, and I choose not to. Now, if you've anything I've said here has rung a bell or made sense to you and you find it valuable, I do present to staff and students for free, either in person or via Zoom. And you're welcome to this PowerPoint and a copy of a book I'm going to explain in a second. My contact information is naturesmasterpieces@yahoo.com. And my phone number is 815-353-5312 with the prefix +1 for the United States. I also have a book out there entitled Look, It's Your Choice How I Want to Feel, which means also whether you want to feel ashamed or not. And I make what they call author copies available to teachers and students for the cost of printing. In other words, it costs me $3.15 to get one. So I make that available to teachers and students because I want people to have this information. And that is the end of my presentation. Okay. Let me get rid of that. And
You remember this?
Okay, I'm done, Doctor.
Yeah, wonderful presentation from you.
Thank
Again,
you.
on the third day, and we see so much of positive energy, positive emotions flowing in the seamless presentations from past 3 days. We are
Yep.
very fortunate to have you on this platform. So we are open for any queries, suggestions, feedback on reflections also on the session. Participants are requested to raise your hands or share in chat box if you have any queries. Or you can raise your hand, we can unmute.
Must have done a good job explaining it all.
I think that it was explained in such a lucid way. Everything was so easy to understand. Like yesterday, there were a lot of queries. These are quite general things we all see in our day-to-day life.
Yep.
It seems very easy, but when coming to implementation, it's very hard. We
Yep.
think it's easy, but it's not that easy.
Yep.
So
I was lucky by teaching it 5 times a day. That probably helped me more than it did my students because I got better at it doing it for myself and looking at myself in these ways in my own life because I did it 5 times a day. So,
yeah, nice. And there is one query in chat box. How to engage kids in learning when we have so many distractions, the social media, electronic gadgets, and how to make them more mindful.
well, one of the tools in the toolkit is I think it's tool 9. I basically asked them some simple questions. One is, what do you really want? Well, how do you want to feel? What do you want your life to be like? And how are things going for you right now? And then the second question is, how's what you're thinking, feeling, saying, and doing working for you? Is it allowing you to have the kind of life you want? Is it allowing you to feel the way you want to feel? Are you getting what you really want? And then the third question is, if you keep thinking, feeling, saying, and doing what you are right now, are you likely to get what you want in the future or feel the way you want to feel and have the kind of life you want to have? And the fourth question is, if someone else thinks, feels, says, and does what they do, are you likely to feel the way you want to with them? Okay. Are you likely to have the kind of life you want with that person? A very important question to ask in relationships. And then one of the other things I always do at the beginning is I always promise, if people will let me, to teach them how to have real power and control in and over their lives. And I start off, I think I did this, excuse me, explained this in one of the presentations. I started out by telling them what real power control is not. It's not getting angry. It's not yelling at people. It's not telling people off. It's not intimidating people. It's not getting people to do things they really don't want to do. That's not real power control. Real power control is having the ability to choose whether you get upset or not, regardless of what other people say and do and what happens. And if you get upset, how upset you get and how long you stay that way. And it's also real power and control is being able to have your life play out as much as possible the way you'd like it to. That's real power and control. So that's one of the things I always do when I first start with somebody is pose those questions and also offer to teach them to have real power and control in and over their lives. And that seems to get that what we used to call, say, getting my foot in the door. It's kind of like I stick my foot in the door before they close it on me. And that seems to work really well. The other thing that seems to work really well is starting out by letting them know I have unconditional other acceptance. And I'll share a real quick story here. When I had my tool time groups, when I first started one of them, they warned me ahead of time. The counselors warned me. I had this one kid who was labeled oppositional defiant and really a bad case. I mean, he was fighting with teachers. And so I worked really hard making eye contact with him our first meeting. And I told him I have unconditional self or other acceptance, explained what that meant, told him that I wanted him to have unconditional self-acceptance. I did my normal thing. I promised to teach him how to have real power control in and over his life. And kind of a strange thing happened at the end of the meeting. Everybody was leaving and I was gathering up my papers. And all of a sudden I sensed somebody over my shoulder. And as I turned around kind of sharply because I kind of spooked, and it was him. It was that kid that they had warned me about. And I looked and I thought, oh, what's going to happen here? And he reached out his hand and said, I want to thank you for letting me be in your group. And I was kind of like dumbfounded. Oh, okay, well, good. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad to have you. But I've always thought of that as a way of remembering just how powerful it can be to do those things, like letting them know you have unconditional other acceptance right up front, encouraging them to have unconditional self-acceptance, and then just posing the question. It's not about judging them. It's about what do you want? And is what you're doing right now working for you or not? And if it's not working, I want to try to help you with that. And that seems to work really well.
Yes, being mindful of what is that we want. You know?
Yep.
What is that we are looking for, and what is that we are aiming for.
There was another thing that happened, another story I'll share. When I met for the last time with my oldest kids, who luckily were going to graduate instead of drop out, one of them actually got the Most Improved Student Award. One of them said, Mr. Mathis, when we first started class, we were real jerks, but you never gave up on us. And he said, why? And I said, well, because I always believed that inside each one of you was a kid who just wanted the same kind of life he saw other kids having. And you just had never figured out how to get that for yourself. That's the kid I wanted to go look for every time we met. That's the kid I wanted to talk to and listen to. And that's the kid I wanted to teach everything I know. And that's the way I've always looked at it. When we deal with people who are struggling, somewhere inside of each one of those people that are struggling is somebody who just wants the same kind of life they see other people having. And because of life experiences, they just kind of lost their way and they've gotten off track and they've just never figured out quite how to get that. So, and sometimes I'll tell them that's how I look at things. Because mindset, I've always believed that mindset is the key to dealing with other people. And sometimes sharing your mindset with them makes a big difference. I also had a friend, the person who told me it's my choice how I want to feel. People would always ask him, how do you deal with these kids all the time? He said, because I don't look at them as a problem. I look at them as a challenge. And I look at them as an opportunity to prove I'm as good at what I do as I think I am. And I always think about that too when I work with people. It's not a problem. It's a challenge and an opportunity to prove that I'm good at what I do. And like I said, I always think that somewhere inside them, there's somebody who just wants to have the same kind of life they see other people having. And my job is trying to help them find their way.
That's nice. And there is one more query. So, especially dealing with the workplace, when the superiors are in a kind of narcissistic personality, where they always take the work, but they don't give any credit. They always keep blaming and gaslighting. So, in that kind of environment, how we would cope up? What kind of interventions? No?
Well, part of developing an internal locus control is that learning and reminding yourself what you do and don't have control over. So I would focus on trying to help them see and realize what they do and don't control. They are never going to be able to control what another person thinks, feels, says, or does. The only thing they're ever going to have control over is what they think, feel, say, and do. And I want to try to get them to focus on that. And that's part of that mental and emotional karate, and whatever this other person does, they're going to do. And there's not much you can do about it, especially if they're your superior. But let's talk about what you can do to control what you have control over and get good at doing that and keeping yourself where you want to be emotionally, okay, and mentally. And that's kind of how I would focus on that because, they really can't, there's some problem solving maybe you could do. Like, for example, with our current president, Trump, world leaders have learned that, you kind of suck up to him and flatter him and you tend to get what you want with him. Well, maybe you could do something like that. That's problem solving. But in the meantime, as far as how you're dealing with that and responding to it mentally and emotionally, let's focus on what you have control over instead of what you don't. You can't control what other people think, feel, say, or do. You can only control what you do. And I would work real hard on working on that, which is very empowering. If they do that and work with me on that, it'll be very empowering.
Thank you. Very well said. Rightly said. Any more queries? You can share in chat box or you can raise your hand. We'll be able to take it up. How to inculcate value education for children in curriculum?
I'm sorry, Doctor. I didn't understand what you were saying.
How to inculcate value education in curriculum for children? Education or education with values.
See, I don't tend to try to do that. Most of the values we want people to have, what I've always believed that if people are in the right mental and emotional place, those values come naturally. It's just logical to do certain things and look at things certain ways. And I saw that with my kids. My kids in my tool time groups, when they interacted with other students or other teachers, they weren't very nice. But with each other, they were very nice. And what I saw is as I taught them to manage their thoughts and feelings better, where they felt less threatened, then they started to manifest or express all those kind of values we want them to have. But they were like in fight or flight mode and so defensive about, how they interacted with the world that they just couldn't be the kind of person we wanted them to be or be the way we wanted them to be. They didn't manifest those values we wanted them to have, but they were like that with each other. And as I taught them to be in a better place mentally and emotionally, they became really nice people to be around. And that's why the one kid actually won the Most Improved Student Award, because he went from being a rattlesnake in a classroom to being this really nice student to have who was working hard and trying to improve himself. And just so my point is, people have to be in the right mental and emotional place to have or adopt or express or manifest the values we think people should have. And the trick is get them there mentally and emotionally, and then the rest will come naturally. At least that's the way it's always seemed my experience. And
Yeah.
I think I mentioned the other day, I like to use the term least common denominator. When we were in math class in high school and junior high, we would always reduce fractions to their least common denominator so we could combine them. Well, what I like to do and what Dr. Ellis did was he broke all the problems that people struggle with down into their least common denominators. For example, they demand what they simply desire. They think they need things they simply want, and they have an external locus of control. So, and they have too much shame. So break them all down into the least common denominators and target those things, work on those things, and then you take care of all the problems that those things typically are the under or least common denominator for. So by working with these kids in my groups on their thoughts and feelings and empowering them so they had an internal locus of control and they were thinking more clearly, challenging their own thinking, and thinking more rationally, then everything else fell into place. They became nice people to be around. They started doing better in school. They stopped using drugs and all those other things. So I really believe in targeting the least common denominators, which is what somebody thinks and feels in response to their real life, remembered, or imagined life events.
There is one more query. I'm curious about the concept of shouldy. Can you explain how it can be harmful and how we can work on letting it go?
Could you repeat that? What term?
Shouldy.
I'm not sure what you're saying. I sometimes have a hard time understanding, especially if you have an accent. I have trouble. I can't understand my grandkids sometimes. My wife has to translate for me what they're saying. Could you type that in the chat box, maybe?
Yeah, I will send you. See?
Okay. Oh, okay, sure. Okay, can you? How it can be. So what you're really doing, everybody has what I call a symbolic self. It's the person you want to be and be seen as by others. Okay. So when we don't accomplish what we want to, then that's a threat to the symbolic self. So what happens is when somebody shoulds on themselves, they're making a demand of themselves instead of simply desiring they be a certain way. So if I say I want to be a certain way, that's one thing. I might not end up the way I want. I might not accomplish what I want to. And that would represent a certain amount of threat to my symbolic self. Okay. But if I tell myself I have to do that and I can't, be imperfect in any way, I have to do something, I have to accomplish this, then that makes the perceived threat much greater than if I simply said I want to do it. Okay. And so it becomes a much bigger threat to my symbolic self. And then afterwards, that makes me more prone to should on myself. And instead of saying, I wish I had done that, I wish I hadn't done that, I'll be saying things like I should have or I shouldn't have done something. So that's making a demand to yourself after an event, after things didn't go the way you want. And the problem, one of the problems with that is the brain treats a threat to the symbolic self the same way it treats a threat to life and limb. So that's one of those ways that people magnify a perceived threat out of proportion to reality. And that's why people get really upset about comments other people make about them or criticism and so forth, because that's really, if somebody criticizes you, that's a way of them saying, you're not living up to my expectations. You're not being seen by me the way you want to be seen. You're not the person, at least I don't think you're the person you want to be. So that's why it's a threat to the symbolic self. And the brain treats it the same as a threat to life and limb. So that's how you magnify. That's why people get so upset about stuff other people say and do. But, you know, when we were kids, they used to teach us, if somebody called us a name, they used to tell us sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Well, that's true. You know, not living up to expectations and having somebody criticize you or put you down or call your name, that's not the same as being attacked physically. But without being consciously aware of that and reminding yourself of that, it's easy for people, their brain will just treat a threat to the symbolic self the same as a threat to life and limb and magnify it way out of proportionality. So shooting on yourself is what happens there. You're basically making a demand of yourself instead of a desire. If you say, I wish I had done better, I wish I had messed that up, that's a desire. But if you say, I should have or I shouldn't have, it basically is saying, I can't have done what I did. Well, but you did. That's reality. You did. But when you say I shouldn't have, that's basically saying that can't be possible. Well, what you're doing there is you're creating a much bigger gap between your expectation and reality. So you're going to generate shame and guilt instead of regret and remorse. So we, you know, the only way to do that is why do you have to do that ahead of time? Why do you have to be perfect? Why can't you make mistakes? Why can't you be like everyone else? Okay. Or we just literally say, stop shooting on yourself. Okay. Shooting on yourself just makes you feel shitty. So, does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks, Ray. Wonderful explanation.
Yeah, it's important for people. We always encourage people to listen to your self-talk, listen to the way you talk out loud, and look for words like have to, can't, should, shouldn't, you know, and listen for those kind of things, because those are cue words that you're probably overdoing something, that you're probably thinking or looking at things in a way that make you feel worse than you need to. Okay. And stop shooting on yourself. It's okay to say, I wish I had done something differently. I wish I hadn't done that. That's okay. That's part of being human. But when you start shooting on yourself, it escalates the perceived threat to your symbolic self, and then you're more likely to feel shame and guilt, which very often does more harm than good. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Ray. Yes, you rightly pointed out. There is no one solution. You know, the solution we see is, you know, being mindful, being conscious, understanding ourselves, our emotions, identifying, naming them, and, you know, working on them, so that by understanding ourselves and the world around us and the way we respond rather than reacting to them, we can control ourselves and not blaming others. We have to take responsibility for our own self. You know, by taking responsibility, we control ourselves. When we blame some others, we are keeping our control on others. So again, that will not help us. As you gave a lot of examples, and we have been able to see. So take responsibility and, you know, keep working on it. Then you will have control on yourself. Then you can change things. So it's a wonderful session.
And that's really important more now than ever before, because when you think about it, if you have an external locus of control and you wrongly see other people as the cause of how you feel and blame them for it, that allows somebody like a politician to come along and offer up scapegoats to you, like to scapegoat immigrants or to scapegoat people of color or whatever. And you're more prone to, you know, accept somebody who's an autocrat or a dictator because you're looking to someone outside yourself. You think something outside yourself makes you feel bad, but you're also looking for something outside yourself to make you feel better. And they're offering all these promises of everything's going to be better if you let me handle it. And that's why people, I think, so it's very important that people learn to have an internal locus of control, that, you know, it's really up to me how I feel, because otherwise it does all kinds of things, including make you susceptible to becoming a religious extremist, to being susceptible to scapegoating, and to accepting and even welcoming an autocrat, which in the long run is not a good thing, you know. So
Yeah, very well said. Thank you. We have learned so many things, you know. Even to summarize, I think it will take another half an hour for me and more to, you know, reiterate what you have said, even in a very concise form. It was so much of learning from you from past three sessions. We are very fortunate, and we
I
look forward. Yes.
had 50 years to figure it all out here. I've been working on this for 50 years. So I'm 74. I started when I was 24 and took a while, but you know, and plus the other thing is my motto as a teacher was always be simple enough to be good. Okay. So you got to keep it simple. And otherwise, if you can't make it simple for people, a lot of times they're not going to get it. And there's the other saying is necessity is the mother of invention. When you work with 14-year-olds, you got to learn to be really good at making things simple, taking some really complex things and breaking it down for them so that it's simple enough for them to understand and see. So I've had 50 years of doing that. So hopefully it's paid off.
Yeah, definitely. See, by reading, by listening or watching, we'll not be able to get the gist of it unless the person who has actually gone through it, the person who has actually experienced it, and the person who have actually implemented it, and coming with the real life situations, real life examples. We need not spend another 50 years. You are there for us to provide 50 years knowledge in just few hours. What more is required? The greatness of knowledge, spreading knowledge. We need not. We are saving so much time and resources, and with that kind of knowledge, with that kind of insights, we can bring sustainable peace, harmony, and development. Not only
Yeah.
personal development, but also world where we have, harmonious world, peaceful world with coexisting with each other. It was really a wonderful session.
What needs to be done is really simple and obvious. The challenge is getting it done. Okay. I mean, I could go into anywhere and I know exactly what I need to do to help people be more peaceful internally and externally. The problem is getting it done and, and making it happen. That was one of Dr. Ellis's frustrations, that, more people didn't adopt some of the things that he developed, like the ABC theory of emotions and so forth. That was one of his frustrations up to the time he passed away. Is that just more? So knowing what to do is not the issue. It's finding a way to make it happen. That's the real challenge.
Yes. As you rightly said, knowing what to do, when to do, where to do, and all these whys and whose questions are very important in every aspect of life. that
Yep.
will keep us directing and also retrospecting whether it is a right thing to do or not.
Yep.
So it's a wonderful session once again and very thought-provoking. I think participants, if you still have any queries, you are welcome to share in chat box, or you can also raise your hand. We can unmute you.
And I very much appreciate the opportunity to do this, Doctor. I really appreciate you having me. Because one of my frustrations is I don't get to do this as much as I'd like to. I could do this every day and I'd be a happy person. So,
Yeah, thank you. Thank you once again. There a lot of appreciation. So we thank you once again for this wonderful sessions for the past 3 days. We
okay.
express our heartfelt gratitude, and we owe you so much for these 3 days, the kind of insights you gave, and we wish you all the success for your future endeavors. And definitely we welcome you and we invite you to be part of our upcoming sessions whenever you get some time. Please inform us. We will also like to learn more in detail in coming days.
Yep.
We'll also organize workshops because the way it is being presented, I think we can have more like workshops, more interactive. So we will also plan more interactive workshops in coming years. Thank you once again, all the way, and thanks, Matt. He's always there. We are working together from so many years, and it's on a special occasion. I would like to thank Professor Matt also for getting a very good soul, and may God bless you with all the
Same to you, Doctor.
some strength, so that you bring more positivity, more consciousness, more mindfulness, and more awareness in this world. And we pray for you, for your health and well-being, and more opportunities. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Doctor. Same for you. Same here. And yeah, Matt's my handler. He's my manager. So pretty much he gets me all these opportunities. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
So with these power-packed sessions, I think we have learned a lot. So as our race has said, it's only thing is we need to start doing it, start implementing. Once we start doing it, and rest the thing follows. You will have challenges, you will overcome it, you'll start learning and everything, and keeps rolling. Only thing is start. Let's start it today with lots of insights for past 3 days. Let's make an effort to start. Let's start thinking about ourselves, and let's start about analyzing what we have been doing, and what we need to do, and what is good for us, what is good for everyone. So with this positive note, I once again thank Ram Mathis for joining all the way, and we thank the entire team for being here on this occasion of Social Workers Day celebrations. It is very important, especially for social workers, because day in and day out, they deal with lot of emotions. They deal with children. They deal with the vulnerable populations like, women, and women with disabilities, women with trauma, women with incidents, accidents, and so much unwanted things, and elders especially. They have a lot of challenges, financial and health and various related, so many verticals of service they are into, and they have different challenges. So I think this is very, very useful session for everyone, especially these kind of sessions have to be organized more for mental health professionals, because they day in and day out, they are dealing with so many emotions.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, they need to cope up with their own emotions. We have seen so many mental health professionals are also committing suicides. Why? Because when we are taking up so much emotions from day in, day out, from morning to evening, we also need some time to cleanse, the energy.
Yep.
And it is very important to understand, take some time off for ourselves and get rid of those negative energy, and also need to rethink what is our duty. Now, what tomorrow we need to prepare for tomorrow, the same energy, positivity, mindfulness, consciousness, without being affected negatively by the day-to-day work. So this is very important aspect on this social work day occasion, that Professor Matt and Ray Mathis and all these eminent scholars who have immense decades of experience, having presented their knowledge. It's a great opportunity for all of us to, especially appreciate and thank and express our gratitude once again to everyone. And thank you, Ray Mathis, on behalf of everyone. We thank you and we appreciate you for your efforts once again. And see you
Yeah,
all. Yeah.
I always say, the more you work on your own stuff, the more you find your own internal peace, the better you'll be able to help other people. And the other side of it is I used to have a poster in my classroom that said, when the great help the small, both are saved. Well, once you get good at doing it yourself and you help other people, that helps you just as much, because in teaching them how to help themselves, you're helping yourself. So everybody wins, but you got to start with yourself. You're no good to anybody if you're struggling emotionally too. So get your own house in order, and then you'll be in a better position to help other people. And with helping other people, it'll help you help yourself. So
Yes, as you rightly said, we we have to be very healthy. We have to be conscious, mindful, so that we can help others. Otherwise, if we are ourselves in lot of troubles, we are not able to manage ourselves, control ourselves, then we will have more concerns, more issues, more problems. So it is very important for all of us. We'll also come up with more sessions for health workers, health professionals also. And this is very useful for teachers, professors who are in educational field, and social workers, psychologists, counselors, and other, even doctors also for that matter. They have a lot of stress going on, and even hazardous conditions where people are working with high pressures, high stress, and anxiety is very much useful. I think, these sessions over these last 7 days was very fruitful. I personally feel, I am now very proud to say that all these sessions were very much, very fruitful and very much relevant to our team, intergenerational. We are talking about across generations, over the generations. We have addressed so many issues, so many challenges, and how to cope up them. And it was a really wonderful session. And once again, thank you for giving your valuable time in the early hours. I think it's too early there in the US. So thank you once again for joining us.
okay. Thank
So,
you for having me, Doctor. Hopefully I'll see you in the future.
yeah, definitely we'll have. Thank you once again. Take care.
Bye-bye.
So with this, all good things have to come to an end temporarily, and we will continue this journey along together with our international pals in upcoming sessions. So now we'll move on to our regular commemorations and presentations. So before that, I would like to invite Mr. Pradeep for the animal welfare workshop session. You can share your details to host Pradeep to the host ID. And now we welcome Mr. Pradeep, who is an animal advocate and activist, and he is also financial advisor working for animal welfare, for almost a decade. And he has been closely associated with us, and as he was associated with international and national organizations. So we also did a lot of academic programs in universities, colleges, and, a kind of dedicated and committed person towards animal welfare, one of its rare traits he possesses for animals. So, Pradeep, you can unmute yourself and start your presentation.
Thank you, Ravindra sir, for the wonderful introduction. Hello everyone, and I warm welcome you all to this International Social Work Day. So we have a power pack session by Mr. Ray. So that was a very enlightening session. So let me share my presentation. One moment. I hope my screen is visible to everyone.
Pradeep, it's fine. You can go to first slide. That is
Sure,
fine.
sir. Sure, sir. Definitely. 1 minute.
Yeah, you are on the first slide.
So the today's presentation is about sorry, it's about rescue, first aid, and rehabilitation. So what we are actually going to move ahead with this presentation is you will be going to learn about how to rescue animals and provide basic first aid. Along with that, what are the necessities, like if you are doing with any wild animal rescues, what are the protocol need to be followed, and how we'll be handling the animal rescues. So we'll be seeing about a real-time example too. So without getting delayed, so let's get started. So here is an example of an dog which is being lying over here. So it's an seems to be in a very dehydrated condition. So this is one of the real-time situation which has happened in Hyderabad. So what would you do when you saw the animal in such condition? What would be your like what you're going to do? Whom you are going to approach? So that's what you would do. That is the thing. So what you are going to do it? How you are going to approach it? So any guesses? Any responses? So most of the time, so he actually like for human or humans when we undergo any problem, like if someone is injured, when someone unconsciously fell on the road, we have many people will gather over there and some even take a video, some even for like call the ambulance. So for animals, there are very limited people, so very less people who come forward, and they also don't know whom to approach and how to help an animal. Most of the circumstances. So they will be searching over the internet. They will be moving on, calling on to the people. But what to do? Being present in the situation. How to help that animal? The first and foremost thing is whenever you are seeing any animal, first you need to take a video or a photo of that injured animal. So and also if possible, if you have the location, you can take the Google Map location, particular location, locality of the animal, where exactly it is being insured, and prior contacting the animal welfare organization, if we can provide the necessary details like the photo, video, and your location and your contact details, so that it could be helpful for the anyone in the animal welfare organization to reach on to the spot and help the animal. Let's say, for example, if you were traveling on the road and you suddenly, like I shared a picture of the animal. So if you notice the animal like in wonderful condition. So it was a remote location. So there are no animal welfare organizations are there. It's a rural part of this city, which is far from away from Hyderabad or any other metro cities. So in that situations, if you can try reaching out to there is an for every state there is an animal ambulance. So you can have a note of it. It's 1962. It's animal ambulance. So they will be having the working hours too, mostly from start from the 7 a.m. in the mornings. So they will be doing up to 3 to 4. So depending upon the state specific timing. Some may have 24 hours also. Some may have restricted time like 7 to 2, 7 to 3. So in that case, normally if you notice such animal, you can provide some water for the animal. If it is in a dehydration state, you can provide some water. And if it's an injured one, so mostly people will have a fear if it's an animal. So what will happen when we approach it? So if you notice that an animal is befriendly with you, then only you try to touch it. So if it is befriendly, then it is allowing you to touch. Then only you try to take the animal to the nearest veterinary hospital or any, if it is in a, you have any close near veterinary hospital, you can take it. Or else you can try calling the animal ambulance. It's a rural part of the city. If it's a highway, even national highway authorities also, they help animals. Like if it's an injured one, they will try to coordinate with the veterinary staff or in the city, so they can send you the there's a needed help. So if you're moving away from the place due to the other emergency work or any other such details, the one thing you can do is you can take any person contact number, either any of the people who are residing there, maybe a shopkeeper number or an ATM security guard number, because they will be staying there itself. So they can guide the people who want to help the animals. Maybe it's an animal welfare organization or even a national highway authorities, veterinary staff, animal ambulance. So whomever it is there. So all the details and point of contact is there. So the help can be done in a necessary quick time. So moving ahead. So this is the situations like which I have explained you. So how it will be. Uh, so this is the exact video has been shared and the Google Map location. You can see it. the picture. So for rescues, when you are talking about wild animal rescues, so it is always advisable, such as monkeys and other protected species. So it has to be done by the registered animal welfare organizations only. So because wild animals are like needs a specialized experience in handling the animals. So when they are injured, especially. So either you can take a help of the State Forest Department or any of the wildlife like registered organizations. So either from the Central Zoo Authority or State Forest Department, if they are having the recognition or they're working closely with the State Forest Department. So in such cases only, uh, they can rescue the animals. Common public, it is not advisable, especially being a wild animals. So the behavior is we not know, especially when they are wounded. So in order to protect themselves, they would be going to the safer places. So in that process, your intention might be to help that animal, but your safety is also very important. So taking into the consideration, so it is highly advisable. So if it's a small pigeon or other birds also, you try to hand over the animal birds or into the registered animal welfare organizations, or even you can go to the zoo also. If you have any zoo in your locality, in your suburbs, you can hand over the injured bird to the zoo staff also. They will be having veterinary doctor, so where they can treat the bird. And also we have the State Forest Department. So they can also have the rehabilitation. So they will recover the bird and they will release into the natural habitat. That is where exactly the animal has been bought. They will be released to the same spot. So this is I have told you like how to approach an animal. So this is an actually a slip bandage. So how when you are especially restraining a dog, most of the times we see the dogs that been injured, right? So you can essentially carry a first aid kit when you are traveling or any of that place. So maybe you can carry a slip bandage. So you can first make a knot. The first picture you can see that it's a soft bandage scarf. Even if you use a knee scarf also, even shoelace also you can use it depending on the circumstances. Many of the times when we are go for any road and all, lot of the times we don't many people don't carry it, so they use immediately pick up the shoelace also. So they safely and gently they tied it to the animals, and carefully you can see in the first picture how they have prepared a lasso. We call it as a lasso. So it's a knotted one. First they will make one knot. Gently they will upload it. That is a exact place of the nose. You can see that how they have tied it in the picture. So with the every single knot on the top of the nose, securely around it, uh, the third knot will be there carefully, and they should not be more tight also, because breathing has to be there, right? So carefully a single knot to be kept and the mouth is closed. The another knot under the chin, and where it ends behind the ears. So secure the ends with the slip knot, knot or a bow behind the animal's neck. So this is the final step. You can see that. So always have a quick access to scissors, because if you tie the knot to knot for a prolonged time, when it means slip bandage for a long time, so it may have results in swelling also sometimes. So even there is because of the lack of respiration problem, because you can see the hair in the nose part, right? So it has been tied too tight means it will become a problem for respiration, and sometimes what will happen is they will be animal may have a risk of vomiting and other situations. So if you if you are okay, the animal is allowing you with gentleness,